Runes.
Wow.
Runes.
Holy shit.
Runes.
Cool ancient knowledge.
Runes.
Oh my god,
That shit says runes.
Hi, I'm Nerdy. You might remember me from the hit American sitcom Friends. I'm here to showcase a class I'm really enjoying in the Conquest of Azeroth Alpha. I would love to tell you all about Runemaster. God damn it! Runemaster. It's a class that uses intellect and has both ranged spellcasting and melee damage dealing specs. Runemasters can stealth, have high mobility through various teleports, and have access to high on-demand crit buffs. This gives them strong burst potential and target swapping capabilities, lending Runesmasher to a magical assassin kind of playstyle.
Runes.
The first thing you really need to know about Moonmasters is a passive called Mind Guard. Mind Guard reduces the Runemaster's stamina by 80%, so Runemasters have like a fifth of the HP as Muggles, but that doesn't really matter because Mind Guard will put a shield on the Runemaster that will cause damage to be dealt to the Runemaster's mana instead of health. Fucking wow. You can see where this is going though. No mana becomes no shield, becomes no health, becomes dead Runemaster. And then you can finally stop playing World of... The other thing that you really need to know about rune monsters is another passive called Rune Daggers. Rune Daggers does three things. It causes your auto attacks to also deal arcane damage that scales based on your intelligence. It causes you to gain expertise and weapon skill that also is based on your intelligence. And it also causes the Runemeister to have a buff on them that alternates every 10 seconds between plus 50% fire or plus 50% frost damage. Now, the name of the passive Rune Daggers might be slightly misleading. And I say this because Rune Flashers can equip one-handed axes, one-handed maces, one-handed swords, daggers, staves, and wands. And Rune Daggers works with all weapon types except wands. You can't shoot wands either, they're just stat sticks. As of this video, only one skill actually requires a dagger in the main hand, and it is called Warp Dagger. Fireblade / Riftblade only require a melee weapon, so you can use whichever one you'd like. Now, the most basic spell Rune Dancers have is called Spell Wrath. It's a really spooky name. Spell Wrath has a few uses. Number one, it has no mana requirement, and it's pretty much the only thing you can do once you've run out of mana. It's a 1.5 second cast, and it will put a boof on the Runemaster that gives some mana regen. It's not a whole lot, though. Runemasters also have two aspects available so far, and these are just their last until cancelled self-buff stance, whatever you want to call them. Dominion increases threat generated and gives them an 8% chance to reflect harmful spells. The Arcana gives passive mana regen and gives your hardcast spells, Unleash Runes, and Word spells a chance to stun for 1.5 seconds. Alright, so as of right now in the alpha, we can't really specialize our characters yet. So this isn't going to be about the specs as much as I'm just going to give you a general rundown of how the core damage dealing abilities we have now work, how they can be used together, and what that feels like. Alright, so Balloon Masters have an ability called Primordial Blast. It's a 2-second cast, 15-second cooldown, and upon dealing damage to an enemy with Primordial Blast, the Dune Master will get a salvo debuff on them for 20 seconds. And it'll randomly be one of 3 different debuffs, but they behave the exact same way, and they just deal different schools of damage. There is Arcane, Frost, or Fire. And so what these debuffs will do is cause every melee hit or spell cast to trigger a magical projectile at every enemy within 30 yards and line of sight of the Runemaster. And then this is where the rotating Rune Daggers buff kind of comes back into play. The plus 50% fire or frost damage buff coming from Rune Daggers lasts for 10 seconds. The salvo debuffs last for 20 seconds, and if you're able to line one of those up and they are of the same type, then it really does a crazy amount of
Runes.
And then the last really important thing to understand about these salvos is that they are triggered either by your spell casts or by your auto attacks, and a faster auto attack does equal faster salvos, hence the use of daggers. Rune Jousters have a neat little combo system where they can generate essence charges with certain abilities. Right now in the alpha, we have access to 2 different essence generating abilities. Fireblade is a melee ability with a 1.5 second cooldown that gives 1 fire essence, and Nexus Dart is a 20-yard range instant spell attack that does minor damage and generates 1 arcane essence. I've got a weak aura here made by Man of Dreads, I believe. You can find it on the COA Discord, and it will keep track of my essences with these little counters you see here. And then you can spend these essence charges with a melee attack called Riftblade. Riftblade will consume all the essence charges that the Brewmaster has. It does this even if you didn't have the right essences for a particular combo to trigger, so don't make mistakes. Also, Riftblade does not miss. It can't be parried or dodged, and I don't think it can be resisted either. Now, with these essences, along with Riftblade, we can perform our combos. We have access to 2 different combos so far in the alpha. Lost Page Pyro Strike requires 3 fire essences and does some single target fire damage. Lost Page Expel Flame requires 1 fire essence and 2 arcane essences and does fire damage to enemies within 10 yards, as well as applying a 10-second fire dot to them. Cosmic Impact is a buff that can be gained through the use of 3 different abilities. It gives plus 15% spell crit and plus 10% spell haste per stack, and each stack lasts for 15 seconds. It stacks up to 3 times for a total of plus 45% spell crit and plus 30% spell haste. Gaining a stack will refresh the duration. Cosmic Impact does not give melee haste. Rune Blast is a 15-second cooldown, just like Primordial Blast, but Rune Blast can be cast while moving. Slaps, just like my mixtape, has a 50-yard range and gives 1 stack of Cosmic Impact. Warp is the version of Blink that I think most mages have always wanted in their heart of hearts. Warp has a 10 to 30-yard range, and that minimum 10-yard range does mean that you can't cast it right on top of yourself. It has a 14-second cooldown. It lets you teleport to a specific spot. It functions as a compass, and it gives you 1 stack of
runes.
Unleash Runes is an interesting ability. It's a 30-second cooldown, 30-yard range, single-target attack that will send volleys of magic missiles at your enemy every 0.25 seconds, starting at 1 second in minimum duration if you cast it with 0 runes, adding 1 missile and 0.25 seconds of duration for each stored rune that you have when you cast it. How do you store runes? Well, with Inscribe Rune, which is a 1-second cast. You can cast it while moving. It has a low mana cost, and it will give you 1 stored rune. These runes last until they are used, so you can log out, die, uninstall, it doesn't matter, they'll still be there until you unleash them. So, with Rune Blast, Warp, and Unleash Runes, Dunezasters have on-demand access to 3 stacks of Cosmic Impact, and this makes them very fun.
Runes.
Mana Shroud is invisibility / stealth. I'm still kind of figuring out the mechanical caveats, but hey, we got stealth. It's a 10-second cooldown with no cost. You can't use it in combat. While you are stealth / invisible, you'll gain a stacking buff every second that reduces the cast time on your next Primordial Blast by 20% per stack, up to 5 stacks, ending in an instant cast Primordial Blast. The buff itself will last for up to 3 seconds after breaking stealth, and I'm not sure if it's a bug or not, but it does currently work on Spell Wrath. Warp Dagger is the only skill we have access to right now that requires a dagger in the main hand. It also requires stealth. The Rune Prancer will teleport to the enemy up to 20 yards away, tickle them mercilessly with their dagger, and apply a 35% movement speed reduction debuff to the target that lasts for 4 seconds. Conjure Runic Familiar is an ability we can use outside of combat to summon this guy. For those unfamiliar with DMT, we call these machine elves. This little thing doesn't fight, not by itself at least. However, he's still a very useful tool. There eventually will be several different auras the Runemaster can apply to the Runic Familiar, but for now we just have one called Field of Destruction. which causes the runic familiar to debuff enemies within 15 yards with a plus 5% magic damage taken debuff that will last for as long as the enemies are within range of the familiar. Now, Displace Familiar is an ability with a 10-second cooldown and a 40-yard range that will teleport the familiar to a location of the Runemaster's choosing. It will immediately explode upon teleportation and stun itself with a reduced damage taken buff. This ability is off of the global cooldown, which is a very useful tool for complementing the Rune Splasher's burst windows. Warp Link is a nifty little ability that allows the Broodmaster to place a Warp Link down that will automatically teleport back to after 6 seconds. The cooldown on the ability itself is only 7 seconds, so as long as you have mana for it, this ability can be used very liberally. Open Riftgate is another movement utility ability. It's a 1 minute cooldown. 1 minute. I wrote 1 minute cast in the notes. It's a 1 second cast, has no cost, and can be cast while moving. Cool. This Riftgate can be interacted with to set your Hearthstone, and it functions in any non-instanced overworld zone. Riftgate Transfer is a 5-second cooldown, 50-yard range, no-cost ability that will teleport the Runemaster to the nearest Riftgate. If you Warp Link after your Riftgate is down, it will move it. I'm not sure if that's a bug or intended. And finally, we have Rune of Power. It is the 3-minute damage cooldown that we have access to right now. The tooltip says 40-yard range. I don't know what that means because I never took geometry. It has a 1.5 second cast and creates a Rune of Power on the ground where you're standing. That lasts for 15 seconds and gives 40% increased spell haste and 20% increased magical damage to all allies standing on it. And lastly, I guess, how does it all fit together? I hate it. That's why I play it so much. I fucking hate it. It's the worst.